Well, we might make a start then.
Sure.
Who'd like to read first up?
I can start.
Okay, thanks, Kathy.
Okay. The fear of criticism. Just how man originally came by this fear, no one can state definitely. But one thing is certain, he has it in highly developed form. Some believe that this fear made its appearance about the time that politics became a profession. Others believe it can be traced to the age when women first began to concern themselves with styles and apparel, wearing apparel. This author, being neither a humorist nor a prophet, is inclined to attribute the basic fear of criticism to that of man's inherited nature, which prompts him not only to take away his fellow man's goods and wares, but to justify his action by criticism of his fellow man's character. It is well-known fact that a thief will criticize the man from whom he steals, that politicians seek office not by displaying their own virtues and qualifications, but by attempting to besmirch their opponents. The fear of criticism takes on many forms, the majority of which are petty and trivial. Bald-headed men, for example, are bald for no other reason than their fear of criticism. Heads become bald because of the tight-fitting bands of hats, which cut off the circulation from the roots of the hair. Men wear hats not because they actually need them, but mainly because everyone is doing it. The individual falls into line and does likewise, lest some other individual criticize him. Women seldom have bald heads or even thin hair because they wear hats which fit their heads loosely, the only purpose of the hats being adornment. But it must not be supposed that women are free from the fear of criticism. If any woman claims to be superior to man with reference to this fear, ask her to walk down the street wearing a hat of the vintage 1890. The astute manufacturers of clothing have not been slow to capitalize this basic fear of criticism, with which all mankind has been cursed. Every season, the styles in many articles of wearing clothing apparel change. Who establishes the styles? Certainly not the purchaser of clothing, but the manufacturer. Why does he change the style so often? The answer is obvious. He changes the style so he can sell more clothes. For the same reason, the manufacturers of automobiles, with a few rare and very sensible exceptions, change styles of models every season. No man wants to drive an automobile which is not of the latest style, although the older model may actually be a better car. We have been describing the manner in which people behave under the influence of fear of criticism as applied to the small and petty things of life. Let us now examine human behavior when this fear affects people in connection with the more important events of human relationship. Take, for example, practically any person who has reached the age of mental maturity from 35 to 40 years of age as a general average. And if you could read the secret thoughts of his mind, you would find a very decided disbelief in most of the fables taught by the majority of the dogmatists and theologians a few decades back. Not often, however, you will find a person who has the courage to openly state his belief on the subject. Most people will, if pressed far enough, tell a lie rather than admit that they do not believe the stories associated with the form of religion which held people in bondage prior to the age of scientific discovery and education. Why does the average person, even in this day of enlightenment, shy away from denying his belief of the fables that were the basis of most of the religions a few decades ago? The answer is because of the fear of criticism. Men and women have been burned at the stake for daring to express disbelief in ghosts. It is no wonder we have inherited a consciousness which affects us, which makes us fear criticism. The time was, and not so far in the past, when criticism carried severe punishments. It still does in some countries. The fear of criticism robs man of his initiative, destroys his power of imagination, limits his individuality, takes away his self-reliance, and does him damage in 100 other ways. Parents often do their children irreparable injury by criticizing them. The mother of one of my boyhood chums used to punish him with a switch almost daily, always completing the job with the statement, "You'll land in the penitentiary before you are 20. He was sent to the reformatory at the age of 17. Criticism is one form of service of which everyone has too much. Everyone has a stock of it which is handed out gratis, whether called for or not. One's nearest relatives often are the worst offenders. It should be recognized as a crime. In reality, it is a crime of the worst nature for any parent to build inferiority complexes in the mind of a child through unnecessary criticism. Employers who understand human nature get the best there is in men, not by criticizing, but by constructive suggestion. Parents may accomplish the same result with their children. Criticizing will plant fear in the human heart or resentment, but it will not build love or affection. Symptoms of the fear of criticism. This fear is almost as universal as the fear of poverty, and its effects are just as fatal to personal achievement, mainly because this fear destroys initiative and discourages the use of imagination. The major symptoms of the fear are self-consciousness, generally expressed through nervousness, timidity in conversation and in meeting strangers, awkward movement of the hands and limbs, shifting of the eyes. Lack of poise, expressed through lack of voice control, nervousness in the presence of others, poor posture of body, and poor memory. Personality, lacking in firmness of decision, personal charm, and ability to express opinions definitely. The habit of sidestepping issues instead of meeting them squarely. Agreeing with others without careful examination of their opinions. Inferiority complex, the habit of expressing self-approval by word of mouth and by actions as a means of covering up a feeling of inferiority. Using big words to impress others, often without knowing the real meaning of the words. Imitating others in dress, speech, and manners. Boasting of imaginary achievements. This sometimes gives a surface appearance of a feeling of superiority. Extravagance, the habit of trying to keep up with the Joneses, spending beyond one's income. Lack of initiative, failure to embrace opportunities for self-advancement, fear to express opinions, lack of confidence in one's own ideas, giving evasive answers to questions asked by superiors, hesitancy of manner and speech, deceit in both words and deeds. Lack of ambition, mental and physical laziness, lack of self-assertion, slowness in reaching decisions, easily influenced by others, the habit of criticizing others behind their backs and flattering them to their faces, the habit of accepting defeat without protest, quitting an undertaking when opposed by others, suspicious of other people with cause, lacking in tactfulness of manner and speech, unwilling to accept the blame for mistakes. Okay, next.
I can read.
Okay.
The fear of ill health. This fear may be traced to both physical and social heredity. It is closely associated as to its origin with the causes of fear of old age and the fear of death, because it leads one closely to the border of terrible worlds of which man knows not, but concerning which he has been taught some discomforting stories. The opinion is somewhat general also that certain unethical people engaged in the business of selling health have had not a little to do with keeping alive the fear of ill health. In the main, man fears ill health because of the terrible pictures which have been planted in his mind of what may happen if death should overtake him. He also fears it because of the economic toll which it may claim. A reputable physician estimated that 75% of all people who visit physicians for professional service are suffering with hypochondria, imaginary illness. It has been shown most convincingly that the fear of disease, even when there is not the slightest cause for fear, often produces the physical symptoms of the disease feared. Powerful and mighty is the human mind. It builds or it destroys. Playing upon this common weakness of fear of ill health, dispensers of patent medicines have reaped fortunes. This form of imposition upon credulous humanity became so prevalent some 20 years ago that Collier's Weekly magazine conducted a bitter campaign against some of the worst offenders in the patent medicine business. During the flu epidemic, which broke out during the World War, the mayor of New York City took drastic steps to check the damage which people were doing themselves through their inherent fear of ill health. He called in the newspapermen and said to them, "Gentlemen, I feel it necessary to ask you not to publish any scare headlines concerning the flu epidemic. Unless you cooperate with me, we will have a situation which we cannot control." The newspapers quit publishing stories about the flu, and within 1 month, the epidemic had been successfully checked. Through a series of experiments conducted some years ago, it was proved that people may be made ill by suggestion. We conducted this experiment by causing 3 acquaintances to visit the victims, each of whom asked the question, "What ails you? You look terribly ill." The first questioner usually provoked a grin and a nonchalant, "Oh, nothing, I'm all right," from the victim. The second questioner usually was answered with the statement, "I don't know exactly, but I do feel badly." The third questioner was usually met with the frank admission that the victim was actually feeling ill. Try this on an acquaintance if you doubt that it will make him uncomfortable, but do not carry the experiment too far. There is a certain religious sect whose members take vengeance upon their enemies by the hexing method. They call it placing a spell on the victim. There is overwhelming evidence that disease sometimes begins in the form of negative thought impulse. Such an impulse may be passed from one mind to another by suggestion or created by an individual in his own mind. A man who was blessed with more wisdom than this incident might indicate once said, "When anyone asks me how I feel, I always want to answer by knocking them down." Doctors send patients into new climates for their health because a change of mental attitude is necessary. The seed of fear of ill health lives in every human mind. Worry, fear, discouragement, disappointment in love, and business affairs cause the seed to germinate and grow. The recent business depression kept the doctors on the run because every form of negative thinking may cause ill health. Disappointments in business and in love stand at the head of the list of causes of fear of ill health. A young man suffered a disappointment in love which sent him to a hospital. For months he hovered between life and death. A specialist in suggestive therapeutics was called in. The specialist changed nurses, placing him in charge of a very charming young woman who began by prearrangement with the doctor to make love to him the first day of her arrival on the job. Within 3 weeks, the patient was discharged from the hospital, still suffering, but with an entirely different malady. He was in love again. The remedy was a hoax, but the patient and the nurse were later married. Both are in good health at the time of this writing. Are we continuing a little bit more? Nicole, I didn't see how far we were going.
Yes, we're going through to where are we?
821.
307, line 821. Yep, thanks, Kathy.
Okay, I can keep going. Symptoms of fear of ill health. The symptoms of this almost universal fear are autosuggestion, the habit of negative use of self-suggestion by looking for and expecting to find the symptoms of all kinds of disease, enjoying imaginary illness and speaking of it as being real, the habit of trying all fads and isms recommended by others as having therapeutic value, talking to others of operations, accidents, and other forms of illness, experimenting with diets, physical exercises, reducing systems without professional guidance, trying home remedies, patent medicines, and quack remedies. Hypochondria, the habit of talking of illness, concentrating the mind upon disease, and expecting its appearance until a nervous break occurs. Nothing that comes in bottles can cure this condition. It is brought on by negative thinking, and nothing but positive thought can cure it, can effect a cure. Hypochondria, a medical term for imaginary disease, is said to do as much damage on occasion as the disease one fears might do. Most so-called cases of nerves come from imaginary illness. Exercise. Fear of ill health often interferes with proper physical exercise and results in overweight by causing one to avoid outdoor life. Susceptibility. Fear of ill health breaks down nature's body resistance and creates a favorable condition for any form of disease one may contact. The fear of ill health often is related to the fear of poverty, especially in the case of the hypochondriac, who constantly worries about the possibility of having to pay doctor's bills, hospital bills, etc. This type of person spends much time preparing for sickness, talking about death, saving money for cemetery lots and burial expenses, etc. Self-coddling. The habit of making a bid for sympathy using imaginary illness as the lure. People often resort to this trick to avoid work. The habit of feigning illness to cover plain laziness or to serve as an alibi for lack of ambition. Intemperance. The habit of using alcohol or narcotics to destroy pains such as headaches, neuralgia, etc., instead of eliminating the cause. The habit of reading about illness and worrying over the possibility of being stricken by it. The habit of reading patent medicine advertisements. Somebody else want to take over?
I can go.
I can have a turn if you want to have a bit more of a break. Does anyone else
Okay,
want to
go
have
ahead.
Okay, the fear of loss of love. The original source of this inherent fear needs but little description because it obviously grew out of man's polygamous habit of stealing his fellow man's mate and his habit of taking liberties with her whenever he could. Jealousy and other similar forms of dementia precox grow out of
Yeah.
man's inherited fear of the loss of love of someone. This fear is the most painful of all the 6 basic fears. It probably plays more havoc with the body and mind than any of the other basic fears, as it often leads to permanent insanity. The fear of the loss of love probably dates back to the Stone Age, when men stole women by brute force. They continue to steal females, but their technique has changed. Instead of force, they now use persuasion, the promise of pretty clothes, motor cars, and other bait, much more effective than physical force. Man's habits are the same as they were in the dawn of civilization, but he expresses them differently. Careful analysis has shown that women are more susceptible to this fear than men. This fact is easily explained. Women have learned from experience that men are polygamous by nature, that they are not to be trusted in the hands of rivals. Symptoms of the fear of loss of love. The distinguishing symptoms of this fear are jealousy, the habit of being suspicious of friends and loved ones without any reasonable evidence of sufficient grounds. Jealousy is a form of dementia precox, which sometimes becomes violent without the slightest cause. The habit of accusing wife or husband of infidelity without grounds. General suspicion of anyone, absolute faith in no one. Fault finding. The habit of fault finding with friends, relatives, business associates and loved ones upon the slightest provocation or without any cause whatsoever. Gambling. The habit of gambling, stealing, cheating and otherwise taking hazardous chances to provide money for loved ones with the belief that love can be bought. The habit of spending beyond anyone's means or incurring debts to provide gifts for loved ones with the object of making a favourable showing. Insomnia, nervousness, lack of persistence, weakness of will, lack of self-control, lack of self-reliance, bad temper. The fear of old age. In the main, this fear grows out of two sources. First, the thought of old age may bring with it poverty. Secondly, by far the most common source of origin from false and cruel teachings of the past, which have been too well mixed with fire and brimstone, and other boogies, woggies, cunningly designed to enslave man through fear. In the basic fear of old age, man has two very sound reasons for his apprehension. One growing out of his distrust of fellow man, who may seize whatever worldly goods he may possess, and the other arising from terrible pictures of the world beyond, where planted in his mind through social heredity before he came into full possession of his mind. The possibility of ill health, which is more common as people grow older, is also a contributing cause of this common fear of old age. Eroticism is also entered into as a cause of fear of old age, as no man cherishes the thought of diminishing sex attraction. The most common cause of fear of old age is associated with the possibility of poverty. Poorhouse is not a pretty word. It throws a chill into the mind of every person who faces the possibility of having to spend his declining years on the poor farm. Another contributing cause of the fear of old age is the possibility of loss of freedom and independence, as old age may bring with it the loss of both physical and economic freedom. Symptoms of the fear of old age. The commonest symptom of this fear are the tendency to slow down and develop an inferiority complex at the age of mental maturity, around the age of 40, falsely believing oneself to be slipping because of age. The truth is that man's most useful years mentally and spiritually are those between 40 and 60. The habit of speaking apologetically of oneself as being old merely because one has reached the age of 40 or 50, instead of reversing the rule and expressing gratitude for having reached the age of wisdom and understanding. The habit of killing off initiative, imagination, and self-reliance by falsely believing oneself too old to exercise these qualities. The habit of the man or woman of 40 dressing with the aim of trying to appear much younger and affecting mannerisms of youth, thereby inspiring ridicule by both friends and strangers. Does anyone else want to have a read?
I can go ahead.
Thanks, Kathy.
Okay. Sorry. The fear of death. To some, this is the cruelest of all the basic fears. The reason is obvious. The terrible pangs of fear associated with the thought of death, in the majority of cases, may be charged directly to religious fanaticism. So-called heathen are less afraid of death than the more civilized. For hundreds of millions of years, man has been asking the still unanswered questions, whence and whither? Where did I come from, and where am I going? During the darker ages of the past, the most cunning and crafty were not slow to offer the answer to these questions for a price. Witness now the major source of origin of the fear of death. Come into my tent, embrace my faith, accept my dogmas, and I will give you a ticket that will admit you straight away into heaven when you die, cries a leader of sectarianism. Remain out of my tent, says the same leader, and may the devil take you and burn you throughout eternity. Eternity is a long time. Fire is a terrible thing. The thought of eternal punishment with fire not only causes man to fear death, it often causes him to lose his reason. It destroys interest in life and makes happiness impossible. During my research, I reviewed a book titled A Catalog of the Gods, in which were listed the 30,000 gods which man has worshipped. Think of it, 30,000 of them, represented by everything from a crawfish to a man. It is a little wonder that men have become frightened at the approach of death. While the religious leader may not be able to provide safe conduct into heaven, nor by lack of such provision, allow the unfortunate to descend into hell, the possibility of the latter seems so terrible that the very thought of it lays hold of the imagination in such a realistic way that it paralyzes reason and sets up the fear of death. In truth, no man knows, and no man has ever known what heaven or hell is like, nor does any man know if either place actually exists. This very lack of positive knowledge opens the doors of the human mind to the charlatan, as he may enter and control his mind with his stock of legerdemain and various brands of pious fraud and trickery. The fear of death is not as common now as it was during the age when there were no great colleges and universities. Men of science have turned the spotlight of truth upon the world, and this truth is rapidly freeing men and women from the terrible fear of death. The young men and women who attend the colleges and universities are now not easily impressed by fire and brimstone. Through the aid of biology, astronomy, geology, and other related sciences, the fears of the Dark Ages, which gripped the minds of men and destroyed their reason, have been dispelled. Insane asylums are filled with men and women who have gone mad because of the fear of death. The fear is useless. Death will come no matter what anyone may think about it. Accept it as a necessity and pass the thought out of your mind. It must be a necessity or it would not come at all. Perhaps it is not as bad as it has been pictured. The entire world is made up of only two things, energy and matter. In elementary physics, we learned that neither matter nor energy, the only two realities known to man, can be created nor destroyed. Both matter and energy can be transformed, but neither can be destroyed. Life is energy. It is anything, if it is anything. If neither energy nor matter can be destroyed, of course life cannot be destroyed. Life, like other forms of energy, may be passed through various processes of transition or change, but it cannot be destroyed. Death is a mere transition. If death is not a mere change or transition, then nothing comes after death except a long, eternal, peaceful sleep. And sleep is nothing to be feared. Thus you may wipe out forever the fear of death. Symptoms of the fear of death. The general symptoms of this fear are the habit of thinking about dying instead of making the most of life, due generally to lack of purpose or lack of a suitable occupation. This fear is more prevalent among the aged, but sometimes the more youthful are victims of it. The greatest of all remedies for the fear of death is a burning desire for achievement, backed by useful service to others. A busy person seldom has the time to think about dying. He finds life too thrilling to worry about death. Sometimes the fear of death is closely associated with the fear of poverty, where one's death would leave loved ones poverty-stricken. In other cases, the fear of death is caused by illness and the consequent breaking down of the physical body resistance. The commonest causes of the fear of death are ill health, poverty, lack of appropriate occupation, disappointment over love, insanity, religious fanaticism.
Thanks,
The
Kathy.
end.
Wow, we can think ourselves into so many fears, can't we? All right, starting with the fear of criticism. Isn't it so true about the styles? I've got a teenage daughter and she's so fussy with what she'll wear. I offer her my clothes and she just looks at me with horror.
And then you get to that wise age where you just don't give a crap and you wear whatever's comfortable.
Exactly.
That's where I am.
Yeah. Yeah. Although, you know, when I was younger, I really didn't realize it was a fear of criticism, but I've come from being well, when I looked at the symptoms, being self-conscious, that was me all over. Nervousness, being timid in conversations with other people, being an awkward movement of my hands, or just not wanting to move at all. So I've had to really work on myself to be able to even have normal conversations with people. So when I read back through this, it was really good for me because it helps to remind me of how far I've come, because really I was extreme with this one, fear of criticism. I didn't realize that what it was. I thought I was just shy, but I'm guessing that's probably what it was.
Yep, same with me. I see a lot of people with the habit of trying to keep up with the Joneses.
Yeah.
Extravagant. Yeah, that's a common one that I see around here.
Yeah, and he's talking about where it springs from, and I can see it with kids a lot, that there really should be some parenting courses before we have kids, because they need to be trained through positive reinforcement and affirmation of their good behaviour, rather than criticise when they do the wrong thing, because kids these days are getting out of control, and parents don't know what else to do except to just take their spirit away and stamp them down to get them to behave, and it's just not the right way to do it.
Agree. When you say kids are out of control, what do you mean?
They're ruling the roost. They're really ruling the roost these days at home.
Yeah. You're a parent first, a friend second, but I think it's turned around that you're a friend first and a parent second.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's the parent's fear. It's their fear of rejection, of loss of love.
There's a point.
Or parents trying to live vicariously their failures in their youth and trying to get their children to relive their youth for them by being super achievers in various avenues, whether it be academically or athletically or dance or other enrichment activities, music, all sorts of stuff. I see a lot of parents seemingly trying to push that when the children don't have the same level of interest, but certainly having them pursue regular athletic pursuits or musical pursuits or artistic pursuits and being diligent and learning to stick with stuff is a good habit, but sometimes parents can take it a bit too far.
Well, I know in our family, my son was pushed to play football, and he was good, but he wasn't great. Nice mother, but let's be real. It's like you're never going to play professional football. He didn't have the drive. He had the desire, but he wouldn't, take any action to try and improve himself. But his dad kept feeding him that, oh, he's so good, and so he was disappointed at times when he maybe wasn't on the first string or whatever. So yeah, you really set your child up to fail in their minds when you set the bar so high and they can't meet it.
Yeah, and then once we're adults, we've got all this sorting out to do. Where did that come from?
Yep.
And then it's a matter of, can I ignore it enough and just focus on, well, Napoleon Hill tells us to focus on our definite major purpose. Can I focus on that enough for that not to be a concern anymore? Or do I need to hash it up and sort it out to be able to move on? I think it depends on the severity of it. I've done it just through focusing on and looking forward, and it wasn't until I read through this and I realised that whatever it was that caused me to be like that has gone away. So that there must be something in just not letting that be a focus anymore.
Sam, go on.
Hey, puss.
My big oaf cat. Go on, Sam. She wants attention, so he's laying on my papers.
That's interesting how he says that some of the basis of this could be it seems to be inherent, but because there was people that were like burned at the stake for daring to express their opinions or beliefs or disbeliefs, that you can see that we would be afraid of criticism.
Yeah.
Well, there seems to be a punishment attached to it, right?
Yep. And in the workbook, there was a line here. It says, the criticism doesn't even have to actually happen to you for the fear to set in. Just watch a few other people getting criticized, and that's usually enough to keep you from giving it a try.
Good point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is really good. And that works the opposite way too with children. If you're getting a behaviour starting to happen in a group of children, you can affirm some positive behaviour, and the other children who are mucking up will see that, and then they'll start to mimic that behaviour so they can get their own affirming happening.
Oh,
Nice. It's nice to know that it goes two ways. It goes both ways.
Yeah. And something else I picked up from this too is, like, you know, my daughter being at high school, there's a lot of, especially with the girls, a lot of criticism. You're not the prettiest and you don't have the most friends. And now I can say to her, you know, that's stemming from their fear of criticism or their insecurities. So whatever someone is projecting out to someone else is really what's happening to them. So, you know, maybe they need more friends. Maybe you need to go and be their friend.
Yep. One of the other things it says in this workbook, it says, faith in yourself and in your abilities is the only thing that will overcome the fear of criticism. Self-esteem is self-esteem, not something you have given to you. It is how you feel. So I thought that was interesting. They kind of gave a solution, you might say.
What line was that, Kathy?
Oh, I'm sorry. This was in the workbook.
Oh, okay. Can you say that again?
Faith in yourself and in your abilities is the only thing that will overcome fear of criticism. Self-esteem is self-esteem, not something you have given to you. It is how you feel.
Yeah.
So, and it's true.
And that comes too with having a purpose and knowing what you're about, doesn't it? So then you can have more faith in yourself because you've got a direction. Rather than,
yep.
you know, these other people in some of these fears where they have no direction, so they're kind of covering up for themselves and having that inferiority complex because they just don't know what to do with themselves, really.
And in the workbook, it also says, that is why the fear of criticism becomes less important as you get older. Over time, you have more experience with who you really are, and you care less about what other people think, but you care more about what you think about yourself. Here's your opportunity to gain that knowledge right now. No matter how old you are, ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen if you attempt something and someone criticizes you? The worst thing is that you might get your feelings hurt a bit. Now ask yourself, what's the best thing that could happen? If the best thing that could happen is that you accomplish your goal, it's a no-brainer. If the worst is that you get your feelings hurt and the best is that you succeed, it doesn't take a genius to know that you were better off to give it a try.
Brilliant.
Yep.
I was trying to listen, but unfortunately I was traveling and I probably missed some great parts. There's one chapter in this book. Did we read through the Devil's Workshop?
No.
We didn't. So did we break this chapter down into 3 parts?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. We got up to Old Man Worry.
So we're just heading into fear of ill health now. I thought that was really...
So we read this. Go ahead, Nicole.
So I'll just...
We ended with the symptoms of the fear of death, right?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
He talks a lot about the media, especially with the fear of health and how, you know, those ones who produce the cures like to do a lot of advertising and get you thinking about getting the flu. Like at the moment in Cairns here, they're advertising, get your flu shot so that you don't get the flu. Well, I don't think I'll get the flu if I'm not thinking too much about getting the flu. I work with children all the time who get sick, and I don't get sick because I have the attitude of I'm not going to be sick. I don't think about it. But as soon as I start to worry, oh, the third child today's wiped their snot on me, I think I might get sick. That's when I get sick.
I think that's true.
Yeah.
Didn't we read somewhere just recently that doctors they're around people that are ill all the time, but because they're not fearful of disease, they don't contract the disease.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that part there, when you were reading, Cheryl, about the flu epidemic, and they asked the papers to stop printing about the flu epidemic, and within a month it was all back in check.
Isn't that amazing? Not that we would get that kind of cooperation these days.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Media.
And again, on page 57 or on line 57, is that fears are nothing more than states of mind. And that's where he says physicians, as everyone knows, are less subject to attack by disease than ordinary laymen, for the reason that physicians do not fear disease.
Right.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's also in the part where he's talking about the fear of death. The entire world is made up of only two things, energy and matter. In elementary physics, we learn that neither matter nor energy, the only two realities known, can be created nor destroyed. Both matter and energy can be transformed, but neither can be destroyed. So it just reinforces the fact that the main element of Napoleon Hill is to direct our thoughts to what we want. That if we want to be sick, we're going to be sick all the time. If we're fearful of being sick, we're going to contract all kinds of stuff. I have a 10-year-old son that gets strep throat like once a month, and his mother almost always gets it. And so she demands that I have to go and get tested for strep throat to have visitation with my son, even though he's going to be on antibiotics. And I'm like, this is ludicrous. So I go to the doctor, and the doctor says, I've been practicing for 3 decades. I've never contracted strep throat from a patient, never, in 3 decades. So your kid's mother, that it's the fears are unfounded. That if you have no physical symptoms and you don't feel like you have strep throat, then there's no visible symptoms. No, don't take antibiotics, and that's my thought as well. Is avoid antibiotics like the plague, unless you're on your deathbed.
Yep. Yep. Does Mum suffer from strep throat?
Frequently, yes.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
If he gets I'm just going to throw this out there, because at one point I got strep 3 times in 6 weeks. And finally, everyone was tested, and it turned out my son, I forget, he was like 4 or 5 at the time, he was a carrier. He wasn't sick. But because I'm always hugging and kissing him, I kept getting strep from him. So, if your son's getting strep that frequently, I mean, there might be someone around him who's a carrier that keeps giving it to him. Wow.
We've explored a lot of different things, from getting the dog tested, but it's something to do in the small town where he goes to school, which is not where I live. And just before spring break, probably a third of the kids were out, and it's the school disinfects the desk, disinfects the rooms every other day, and can't seem to figure out what the carrier mechanism is.
Wow.
I personally believe it has more to do with attitude and general demeanor and expectations than anything else.
Well, and like they said with the flu, because it was talked about so much that it perpetuated. So
yeah. This experiment that Napoleon Hill used to do, and he stopped doing it because people were starting to faint and all sorts of things, but he would get students to go and over the course of a day approach a victim, he would call them, and the first one would just say, oh, you don't look very well, you're feeling okay? And I'm okay. And then the second one would be a little bit more, you look quite pale, you need to sit down, or do you want me to get you a glass of water? And the third one will be really quite forceful and say, maybe I need to get you some help. You don't look very well at all. And by that stage, they'd be feeling quite sick. And a couple of them fainted, so he stopped doing it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Isn't there a test? Do you know they have those, they call it the placebo effect? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Where people are given medication and it's the same kind of thing. They think that they're cured when they're not. And it's just, what is the placebo? It's like it's not antibiotics.
It's just a sugar, a sugar tablet.
It's sugar.
Mm.
It's nothing.
It's nothing.
It's a photo negative. They thought they were sick, but they really weren't.
Yeah. I mean, it's true. And like, even like when it comes to weight, my girlfriend, her daughter was getting married last year, and all she kept talking about at knitting was like, I just don't want to gain weight before the wedding. And I finally looked at her, this was like over a year ago, and I finally looked at her, I said, you know what, Michelle, why don't you focus on what you do want instead of what you don't want? And she kind of looked at me, and I just said, your subconscious doesn't know the difference. So you're focusing on the negative, and and she was gaining weight, and so was her husband. I'm like, focus on what you do want. The weight you want to be, not the weight you don't want to be. So, the mind really, the subconscious mind always, answers whatever you're focused on.
Very true. In line 575, he talks about how there is a seed of fear, and probably a seed of all of the different types of fear, but it's not until we permit ourselves to go into the thoughts of fear and worry and all of the other things that we can be thinking about to encourage that seed to grow, that we start to actually manifest the fear. So keeping our mind off, like you just said, Kathy, off things we don't want and on the things we do want will help us to not nurture those seeds of fear and make them actually grow into a fully blown fear, so to speak.
But then, at the end of 579 and 580, he goes, every form of negative thinking may cause ill health. So it's not just, like, being scared of being sick or thinking about illness, but it's like, if you're a worrier, you'll get sick. If you're disappointed all the time, you're going to get sick. If you're stressed out, you're going to get sick. So I underline that line, because it's not just focusing on ill health. It's, any negative thinking can lead to ill health.
Yeah, and there are some healers who specialize in that, and they will take the person and say, okay, where is it that you're having problems? And they'll relate it to a specific area of thought that's causing that problem in that particular area of their body. Let me see if I can think of an example.
There's a body code practitioner and he uses magnets and intention to help people rid of ills and pains and that kind of thing. I can't remember what his name is, but it's quite amazing what he does with helping people release illnesses.
Yeah, so they kind of work out what the thought processes are through what the ailment is. So they work it backwards the other way. Mm-hmm. So, if you've got problems with your kidneys, it may be that, or a better one is people who have pains in their shoulders and lower back. It could mean that they're feeling like the weight of the world is on them, and they're worried about certain things. They're a worrier. So they talk them through the process of, okay, so what are you worried about? What is the weight that's on your shoulders? And once they relieve that, the pain goes away.
Wow, it sounds like they're taking Louise Hay's book, and they're make a practice out of it. 'Cause, she talks a lot about, where you have aches and pains, and then what it could mean emotionally in your life.
Yeah, so it's interesting, cool, isn't it? Mm. I don't know much about that, but it makes sense to me.
Well, yeah, her book, I think it's like You Can Heal Your Life. And depending on, like, and it goes through alphabetically every little ache and pain or whatever and what it means emotionally.
Might be worth a look.
Yeah. Yeah, they hate how today.
Napoleon Hill talks about an auntie of his who used to visit when he was a child, and she always used to be one of those people who spoke about ill health, and he said that she used to put her hand on her left breast and say, I know that one day I'm going to die of cancer. And he read in the paper many years later that she'd died cancer of the left breast. So yeah, she talked herself into it. She told her subconscious mind that over and over again, and the subconscious manifested it.
Yep.
Isn't that
I know.
sad?
And we can do the same with health. We tell ourselves that we're bright and healthy and full of energy, and we're giving that affirmation to our subconscious mind. That's what will manifest. Because
it's a bit of a like, I wasn't too sure how I felt about this when I was reading it. For example, last week I was at a friend's and her daughter was ill. There's a virus going around. It's a real bug. It's there, and it causes vomiting and diarrhea. So I was at my friend's, and her daughter, who's 2, was just every hour on the hour throwing up to the point where she had nothing left to throw up. It's just bile, right? So she sat on my lap, and all of a sudden I started to feel sick, just nausea. Now, admittedly, I've got a cast iron stomach. I mean, it's got to be really rancid. Like, the bug has got to be like major before I can throw up. But I was starting to feel nauseous. And my friend was also feeling sick, and we weren't sure if it's just because we were around her. We were talking about, like, what on earth is, because we'd forgotten the day before that daughter was by her grandmother's house and everybody in the house was sick. And then we put 2 and 2 together. I left feeling nauseous, got back here, and I was still feeling queasy. I spoke to my friend, and she'd already thrown up. I wasn't sick, but I felt sick. And then we had the call, the mastermind group. I jumped on the call, and then I obviously just got distracted. So I forgot that I was nauseous, and I forgot that I felt sick. And then it had just gone, and it was late for me. So by the time the call's finished, I've gone to bed, woke up, and I'm fine. So that was prior to reading this. As I'm reading this, I'm thinking about it. There is a bug. It's there, and people are being sick. I don't think I was feeling sick. Sometimes there are things, like, it's a real bug. I got distracted, and I think that's probably the only reason. Now that I've read this, I've realized, oh, I didn't think about being sick, so therefore I wasn't sick. But I could have just as easily been sick without focusing on it. I mean, there's a bug going around. So I was a bit unsure how I felt about reading that paragraph, or that section there. Because sometimes things just are, like, you are sick. You don't bring it on yourself through thinking about it. I mean, I kind of understand how you can intentionally, fall into that trap of being sick or talk yourself into feeling sick. But actually, sometimes things just are, right? They just are. People are sick. Bugs are flying around. People will get cancer. Do you know what I mean? And that's why I'm kind of a little bit like, I'm not quite sure how I feel about it. Like, if like, there are some things that are hereditary, and you can say, I'm not going to think about this at all. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to get it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. And I have heard a lot of information about, including through Napoleon Hill, that sickness cannot live in the body of a positive mind. You would have to be pretty positive. You would have to be positive all day long, every day, which I don't think any of us are at that stage yet.
Right.
But people have healed themselves from cancer through positive thinking. I know of a woman who sat and watched comedy movies all day with her husband and only allowed herself to laugh and be happy, for a period of time and it went away. And there's lots of stories like that where people through positive thinking have healed themselves, because prior to that they didn't have thinking. So I believe that illness can't live in a positive environment, because dis-ease is lack of ease.
Mm.
Yep.
But we are susceptible to it because we're not perfect thinkers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think maybe the point here too is that if you are going to think about it, you are definitely going to get it. Whereas,
exactly.
right? Like maybe you will get it because it's just you can't help it. But if you do think about
Just going to mute.
definitely right.
No, it's going away. I'm not sure who I just. Sorry, but it was noisy.
But you know, this is talking about not ill health, but the fear of ill health, and and what he's talking about is if you're thinking about it and if you're fearing it, you attract it to yourself because you're focusing on ill health, and your subconscious mind doesn't know the difference. You know, not because there are legitimate illnesses and we get them, but I think this is more like how people who think about illness can attract it to themselves.
Yeah, I agreed. Yeah. And we all know those people that continuously complain about their aches and pains all the time, right? And they just negative vibration totally, aren't they? You don't be around them.
One of you said something about having a bad ankle. I would immediately look at mine. I'd be like, oh,
I had when I was in my first marriage, my mother-in-law was ill, and when we went to go back to Canada for Christmas, you know, she had said, well, this might be my last Christmas. And I'd mentioned this to a girlfriend of mine because, you know, I'm not from this area. But she had known the mother for a couple of decades or whatever. And she said she's been dying for like 15 years. You know, so, you know, like, because to me, it's like, well, we can't go to my house for Christmas and see my family 1,000 miles away because, you know, this might be her last Christmas. And, you know, so... And this was a person who that's all she talked about was her illnesses, and she was constantly ill till the day. I mean, it's a sad life in a way, but
that's like the self coddling section, isn't it? Where it serves as an alibi for lack of ambition.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah, and the intemperance. I know my brother drinks because he has aches and pains. Well, that's one of the reasons he drinks. He's an alcoholic, but, oh, you know, my back was really bad. And I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever.
I found this pretty funny line 615 where he says, fear of ill health often interferes with proper physical exercise and results in overweight by causing one to avoid outdoor life.
That's my excuse, and I'm sticking with it. Honey, I'm scared to go out. I might get hurt. I might twist my ankle. I need to sit here.
Oh, man. That was pretty funny.
Yeah. It is a good one.
Well, you know, and the part before that, it starts on line 602, and he says, experimenting with diets, physical exercises, reducing systems without guidance, you know, are one of the, I guess I should look at what it said before that. You know, talking to others of operations and accidents, like things that might auto-suggestion. And I kind of questioned when he was like trying different diets or physical exercises, you know, or things to avoid doing, auto-suggestion.
Yeah, I thought of that too, and without professional guidance, and to me,
Well, all I can think of is that this is 100 years ago or
yeah,
whatever,
yeah,
and we know a lot more. And so, trying different physical exercises, it's not the, get rich quick type of scheme or you lose 50 pounds in a week type of thing, but, finding what you might like or trying different diets and seeing which one, feels good to you.
yeah. I agree.
Yeah,
I thought it was kind of a very old-fashioned statement.
I
Yes.
think,
Well, all men are polygamists. I mean, come on. I read some of this and I just smile because, it's just like 100 years ago, and it's like, wow, times have changed.
Well, same with the baldness from wearing hats.
I know.
Well, duh.
Yeah, well, that's what they believed back then, I guess.
yeah. And I guess with the auto-suggestion thing there, he's talking about people who are continually looking for the next fix. They don't stick with anything. They're just constantly searching for something that's going to fix them or make them feel better or stop them from getting sick. Like the person who is kind of addicted to constantly looking for the next big thing. Whereas, the way that us women today look for different exercise routines that will fit our personality and that we'll enjoy, or we try the different diets, like, there's the paleo now and vegan, and there's all those different things. If you want to try them, that's fine, but if you're constantly looking at a different diet every week and not sticking to any, that's probably when you're telling yourself, I'm going to be overweight, because you're giving yourself that auto suggestion of, I need to find something to help me.
Yeah, that could be.
And the fear of loss of love. The way he talks about jealousy there, and he says that it sometimes becomes violent without the slightest cause. I'm sure everyone's seen that happen. Especially when people are younger and
Yep.
they're just not secure with themselves yet, and so it doesn't take very much to spark that little feeling of jealousy.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, but it's still got to come from somewhere, like it's still got to come, like why does that person have that issue, whereas someone else may not? Is it purely just their self-image and how they feel about themselves, or is it something that happened in the past, or does it not even matter?
Yeah, it could be a combination of any of those things.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that men used to steal women?
Right. They used to club them over the head, didn't they? And pull them, drag them by the hair.
Yeah, that's the image I got.
I just saw a statue that was called The Rape of Something Woman. And it really wasn't a rape. That was a term that was used for like abduction. And there's a famous statue somewhere in Italy that depicts this, and it talks about how one civilization, the men would actually steal women from another group or whatever, and that was a thing. And I went, whoa, that's crazy. But I guess it did happen.
Go on.
And like you said, it still does today. It's just that they stolen away with promises and persuasion rather than brute force.
Yeah. This idea of gambling and stealing and spending beyond one's means to impress someone, I hadn't thought of that aspect. People would do that, but I guess that's an issue too.
Yeah. Yeah, I certainly hadn't thought of gambling in that perspective.
In the workbook, it talks about loss of love, and it says No one wants to lose the love of someone they care for, but there is a big difference between a natural and normal concern and living in fear that it will happen. The real issue is why you think it is a possibility that you will lose the love of the person you desire. If you're afraid that someone won't love you, it may mean that you are dependent on the love of some person or group to help define your self-image and make you feel successful and complete. Fearing the loss of love can also be a signal that at some level you know something about yourself that makes you believe you are not worthy of their love. You are worried that you cannot live up to their expectations. Your fear is not just that you will lose love, it is also that you fear that your secret weakness of failing will be exposed.
Yeah, and it may not even be a secret weakness that you actually have. It may just be your opinion of being unworthy, which is
Right.
unfounded. Yeah.
Yep.
And that's something that I think we all have to work on. I think that there's more of incidences of people feeling like they're unworthy than people feeling like they're above everyone.
Yeah, I would agree.
Well, he finishes it with saying, the greatest danger in fearing the loss of love is that it can also erode your faith by eating away at your self-image and self-confidence. If you don't believe that you deserve to be loved, if you are constantly worried that you aren't good enough, it's hard to maintain a healthy self-respect. And if you do not respect yourself, you cannot have faith in yourself.
Yeah.
Well, like he says, there's normal concern, and then there's crazy.
Yeah, and mostly due to a weak self-image, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so that's when they would need to sit down and say, who is the person I want to be? And start having that image of themselves, which is easier said than done.
Well, and people sabotage their relationships because of their fears and because of their, lack of self-image, and their, they project that in the relationship, and they end up screwing it up.
Yeah.
Because they drive the person away with it.
Yeah. You hear people, putting themselves down when they're talking to someone, and they're telling that person that eventually that person's going to start believing these things.
Auto-suggestion.
Yeah.
You're feeding your subconscious mind that you suck. Eventually he's like, you know what, you are right, you do suck.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
True.
So sometimes based on a lot, it's experiences as well, isn't it? And how you were raised, and there's so many factors that it's not just, you can't just shake everything off. With the best will in the world, everything that how you were raised, what your parents were like, your brothers and sisters were like, all of that baggage comes into your relationships with you as well. And again, your suggestion based on your past experiences, I guess, and you bring all of that to the relationship, it's kind of sometimes doomed before and you're aware. Sometimes you can be aware, I guess, hence the fear. I can speak personally. I've said many of things and thought, oh damn, like without knowing all of this stuff, you can act, or you can. I recognize that those sort of symptoms, and how because I guess sometimes, and this is just speaking just in relationships, there is that. It doesn't mention anything about control here, but you do panic and maybe try to squeeze too hard and then lose or break what you have. So all of that comes from fear, and it's just a shame that we don't have a little handbook like this. When we enter relationships, it's like, okay, I can let that go. But sometimes I think it is fear that triggers. You don't identify it as fear of loss of love. It's just fear, isn't it? It's just fear of what's going on and not being able to control the situation, or being able to be honest and speak freely about what your own feelings are and how and how just how you feel about things. I think that's what's missing. And again, that just comes from your upbringing, doesn't it? And your experiences in life. I think that my view.
A lot of it, for sure.
And that reminds me of the saying that you need to love yourself first before you can love anyone else. So coming to grips with and sorting out those things that are causing you to feel that way. And one of the things that you can do is to go back and give new meaning. Like, so for me, my mother would have this saying when we did something wrong, she'd say, "Oh, you're useless." And so we grew up thinking that we're useless. So what you can do is go back and think, well, what state of mind was mum in when she was saying that? Well, she was in an unhappy marriage. She felt she was stuck. Dad was always away. He was an interstate truck driver. She was stuck at home with 3 girls and working part-time. So she wasn't in the best state of mind. So you can give new meaning to the things that were hammered into you as a child, and then think to yourself, well, it wasn't actually true. It was just mum's state of mind. I'm not actually useless. I'm actually quite competent. And then that takes a little bit to sink in, so you can use auto-suggestion to help that and get yourself to a point where you can get rid of all of those self-limiting beliefs and then feel better about yourself and move on to better relationships, cleaning up the baggage.
Yeah, I was on a course recently, safeguarding, and it was about child abuse, and there was a lot of talk about emotional abuse. When a child says, a parent will say, mum or dad will say, "You're so stupid." It's these very things, because people are realizing now the harm that does to the child growing up, because that's what they hear. And I think there's a video we're watching. It's like the things that children say. Like you'll know yourself, Nicole. You've got young children and they're playing, but some of the things that they come out with whilst they're playing. And there was one clip with a young girl, and she's playing with some toys, and she's singing to herself. She's going, "You're a little cow, you're a little cow," which is obviously what she's heard. It's not funny, but it kind of is, because like some of the things that the kids come out with, you'd be horrified. Like their parents would just be mortified, because children just repeat. They say things about themselves which they've been told. That's the kind of thing that they grow with. So it takes a lot. Like now it's called emotional abuse, and it's we've had a whole safeguarding training on it, and parents are going to have conversations if teachers notice this kind of behaviour. They're thinking of calling in the parents and talking to them, because it is really, really dangerous. And sometimes most of us on here are parents, probably. Sometimes you do just say, "Oh, so you stupid idiot," but like you're a parent, so sometimes you just say whatever. But the impact is like, wow. And like, I know, like you were saying from your experience, Nicole, you have to kind of undo and maybe give new meaning to things. But that's because you've learned this now. You've learned, and you're understanding. But those poor thousands of other people that haven't got a clue, that it's quite damaging.
Yeah, and as a child, when someone of authority says something to you, it goes straight into the subconscious mind. Whereas if it's just a random person, it takes that auto-suggestion of repetition over a few times to sink it in. But a person of authority, when you're a child, it's straight in.
So when it says, like, this is talking about the fear of loss of love, relationships, intimate man and woman kind of thing. But what about with your family members? Or does that just not? Because that's where I took this.
I think it's relationship.
Just relationships, okay.
Any relationship. It could be a parent, child, a couple, any, losing love of your children, or a child losing the love of a parent.
Yeah, you see some parents when their children are getting older and they're ready to leave home, they're making themselves sick so that now adult child stays there with them. So there's a fear of a loss of a loved one there. Maybe they don't have a spouse or friends. I've seen that happen.
Yep. I used to, when my daughter was young, I used to call her Chubby Cheeks, because she just had, the cutest little cheeks. And one time I went to take her picture, and she said to me, "Mommy, should I suck in my cheeks?" And I thought, "Oh my God, what have I done?" So that was it. I never called her that again, and I talked to her. She had beautiful cheeks because it was a term of endearment that, like, and my son used to cry really, really easily about things. And so when he would go on a timeout, I remember asking him, he was like 4 or 5, he was 5 years old or something. And I said, "Now, why were you on a timeout?" And his answer to me was, "Well, because he was crying." And it was like, it was like, no, so he, and that's what I would do is whenever they would, have a timeout, I would always discuss afterwards, why were you on a timeout? Because the misunderstanding, I mean, he was led to feel that because he was really sensitive and cried easily, that's why he was being punished. It was like, not at all. I felt awful.
Yeah. Good that you took the time to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you took to clarify that. You might not just as easily not have done, thinking that he understood why he was there. It's, because some parents might not have gone back to check, and that doesn't make them bad parents. They just assume that, he got it. It's just, wow.
I wish I would have thought of that when my kids were little. That sounds.
Yeah, it was just something, I don't know why, I just like, I wanted to make sure he understood. And it was like, holy cow, and even now sometimes my daughter will bring something up and how she interpreted things. Just, it's like, I'm glad we can discuss it. And being that he was sensitive, he was good about expressing his feelings, so we could discuss things and he wouldn't bottle them up. So I was happy about that, but I made my fair share of mistakes.
I like that.
Now, and they're doing well, so I did something right.
Yeah.
The jury's still out on mine. No, I'm only joking.
I have to get going because I'm booked in for brekkie in 10 minutes. So my family's taking me out for breakfast for Mother's Day. So enjoy the conversation, and I'll talk to you guys soon.
Okay,
Happy
bye.
Mother's Day.
Thank you, and to you too tomorrow.
Yes.
Bye.
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 So should we move on to old age? That's the next one.
Yeah.
Sure.
Old age and the fear of dying, they kind of go together. But, to me, what I thought of is like, and you hear this at least more current now, is not so much the fear of death, it's the fear of dying, the dying process, and what's that going to be like? And is it going to be painful?
And am I going to be a burden?
Yep.
That kind of thing too.
Yep.
Or am I going to have, have all my faculties but not be able to do anything with my body, or vice versa? Yeah. Yeah,
Alzheimer's runs in my family. Yeah. My dad, 2 brothers, and his mom all had it. And I was just like, I'm taking steps because I know, and I visualize a nice, healthy, mushy brain. So just like that's not going to happen to me. But there are those fears,
Yeah, and you can't help that when it's in your history, it's in your physiological makeup,
Yep.
Sleep is really important to warding off Alzheimer's, right? Because that's when your brain is flushing out toxins, is when you're sleeping. So make sure you get enough sleep.
I do. I don't use an alarm clock. I get up whenever I wake up.
Good job.
So one of the things in the workbook that it says, having fear about growing older probably means that you believe your success is directly tied to your youthfulness and that somehow your success will diminish as you age. If you dwell on that fear, it will erode your faith in your abilities and you just might lose your grip. Or you could look at all the people just like you who are making a difference in the world, and you could just keep doing what you do. Only now you'll do it better because you've got the experience that comes with age. And it's so true. I mean, you see, you do see people, you see guys who drive the Corvettes. And it makes me laugh because when you look at them, it's like they got all these little fancy sports cars, but it's like awful to try and get in and out of. But it's the fear of old age. They have the toupees. They some of them get the young women, and
Yeah, trying to ward it off, trying to pretend it's not happening.
Yeah, like as if a Corvette's going to make a difference, but.
But you know what my daughter said to me one time, Mom, why is it all that all the old guys have the nice cars? I said, it's because they're the ones that have the money. They can afford to buy them now.
And it's compensation.
Yeah, no, I didn't tell her that.
I must admit, though, I did have a little chuckle to myself again because I recently on another call I was talking about competition, and I've really been checking in, doing a lot of self-checking with myself. I must admit, yeah, passing 40, I was a little bit like, oh, so much to do and so little time, which is ridiculous. Like I don't fear getting older. I didn't consciously think, right, oh my goodness, I'm afraid of getting old. But I am conscious of, I've got so much I want to do. And I'm starting to realize that, and it excites me. I don't think, oh my God, I'm going to run out of time. But I am now starting to, and I guess that's the, old age, you get more older. As you get older, you get wiser. I'm ready. There's just so much I want to do, and I'm kind of like excited about it.
For you.
But I wasn't, before in my young days, I was just younger days. I was just kind of happy. It's like I didn't actually think. I'd never even considered being 40, let alone 42 or 50. Like didn't think about it. That was like your mum and your mum's friends. When you go to parties, and I am now them. My children are there, my nieces and nephews, and I am my mum and her friends' ages. Like when I used to go to family dues, I remember, the old people pitching, and I was out.
And you used to, 60 or 70, I'm in my late 50s, and when you were younger, you think, 50 is old or 60 is old. Well, now that I'm like 58, it's like, 70 is not really old at all. Whereas before, it's like, someone dies, it's like they're 74. No, that's too early, 80. So, and I've taken the approach of, I have little aches and pains, and it's like, you know what? I know I'm going to live an old age. It's just, my grandfather died right before his 100th birthday. And it's just like, you know what? I want to go into my old age really healthy. So that's where I'm studying about the brain, and I'm improving my diet, and I'm stretching and all this because I want a healthy body that carries me with my healthy mind into my old age. Instead of fearing it, it's like I'm going to improve it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I've been the couch potato too long, and it's like, okay, time to make changes.
Me too, and I'm still having a little bit of issue with that, but I'm trying to give myself some motivation because I want to do some traveling, and I'm thinking, okay, how many people have I heard that have said, do it when you're young because, there's lots of walking and stuff to do, and I'm going, okay, there's no way I'm going to be an old person that can't walk around when I'm doing my world traveling. So I got to keep shape.
I went on a river cruise a couple years ago in Europe, and there was a lot of retired people at the time, and there were some of them. I was shocked that they were on this trip because it's like they just had so little energy. They couldn't go on a lot of the tours, so they had special tours that really required no energy. And I just thought, I don't want to be that. And yet there was this other man, he was 84 years old. And this man, like he had told us like a few years ago, he went down to, he flew into Cancun, and then he and his wife took buses down to Guatemala. No reservations. They just slept wherever the bus took them. And for 6 weeks, they traveled like this. And just like, I think he was 79 at the time. He was 84 on the cruise. And I was just sitting there listening to this man. And we got to this one part where we had to walk uphill to go up this like castle or whatever. And we're all like, oh. And then here this 84-year-old man's coming down. And we're like, oh, for Pete's sake, this man made us all look so bad.
Yeah, loads out.
Oh, he was just amazing. So, you know, he just, the energy and the spirit he has, it's like, I love it. And that's what I want to be like. That's what I'm going to be like.
Yeah, they say it's a state of mind. It is the state of mind.
So, and then, you know, on line 721, it goes, the habit of killing off initiative, imagination, and self-reliance by falsely believing one's self too old to exercise these qualities. And you know what? I thought of Bob Proctor. I mean, he's going to be 82 this summer. And this is a man who is doing more than he's ever done. So, you know, there's proof that he's doing the opposite. He's using his imagination, his initiative, his self-reliance, and he's growing. He's doing the exact opposite of what this says. And I thought, that's awesome. So, you know, it's all in the mind. So does anybody have anything on fear of death?
That's such a complicated subject, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. And you know, I think for me, the way I see it is a lot of it comes from your culture and what you've been taught by your families on how you view death. I don't know that I don't think it's an inherent thing. I think it's what you've been taught and what you've been exposed to.
Well, and it's funny because my parents were almost like extremes. My father, who had the Alzheimer's, would never discuss with my mother about, like, you know, when they pass away, where they wanted to be buried or anything like that. You know, he refused. Mm-hmm. And he refused to acknowledge that he had Alzheimer's. Mm-hmm. He just said, I remember what I want to remember. And that was that. And yet my mother is very matter of fact. She's 87 and sharp as a tack, but she's like, you know what? I've had a good life. And when my time comes, it comes, you know, and that's it. So very matter of fact, you know, one would never discuss it. And she's just like, well, whenever it happens, it happens. And so I'm more like my mother.
Well,
like, you know,
you have a positive, somewhat a positive role model there.
Yeah, I think the fear of death, as I'm reading it, like for me, my own, I'm kind of like, and when I say my own, don't misunderstand, I'm not sitting here thinking about it or willing it or anything like that. I can kind of be like, okay, whatever, because who knows? Who knows? We don't know what's on the other side. It could be awesome. I can, because of the studying that I'm doing, I'm able to think in that way. It's about myself.
I think it's going to be beautiful on the other side. For me, it's, again,
my children
not the fear
or family, the fear of death. I mean, I don't think about it, but I don't know if I haven't, I mean, I'm just saying it now, and then I switch that thought off. I don't even think of it. I don't know if I receive that the same way. But to your point, yeah, I think it's beautiful. I think I'd like to think we have absolutely no idea, so I can choose to think what I want. It's what I want it. And as far as I'm concerned, it's amazing. Like, it is going to be fantastic. And it's, you know, it's endless. It's endless, but I can make it be and mean whatever I want. So I guess in answer to what I was just going to say, that would be the same if it was somebody that was close to me. But it's difficult for me to even to think like that about anybody else other than myself. Does that make sense? If we're talking about fear of death and it's my own, I can be matter of fact. I think, you know, I'd like to think it's an amazing place. I don't necessarily believe in I don't really have too many beliefs, but I think it could be pretty awesome. Maybe we're still here. Maybe we still see. Maybe, you know, but it's nice. It's beautiful, and it's expansive, and there's still growth. And I can feel very comfortable saying that about myself. And if you know, I just don't know what others. Again, that's fear of loss of love, isn't it? I don't know. I don't know what that is, but I can't think about anybody else. I don't know if I'd have the same view if it was somebody that was close to me. Do you know what I mean? If I lost somebody.
I definitely think that it's really a sad thing that people have been taught that there's, you know, the fire and brimstone and going to hell and all that kind of thing, because that definitely has brought fear of dying to the forefront. For some people, it's just absolutely debilitating, right?
Mm.
Yep.
Did somebody say a while ago, it's not the fear of death itself, it's the fear of dying? Or
That's what I said, and that's to me, it's like the part where my life is going to come to an end. You know, I don't. You know, I said to my husband, I go, you know what? I'm not brave. Like you know, I mean, you can keep me drugged till the time goes if you're the one. I mean, some people are like, no, I want to be awake, and I'm like, I don't know if I really need to be, but otherwise we don't really. I don't think about it because I'm pretty healthy, and I just figured, you know, I'm just gonna, like he says, move on with my life. I mean, that's all you can do. It's just if you have purpose and you have goals, like you say, and you just keep focusing on that, and you focus on, you know, taking care of yourself, you're gonna have a good life, and it's gonna end when it's gonna end.
Yeah.
I that's the view I kind of. I mean, it's literally just because we read it.
Yep.
It came in the chapter, so it provoked a thought. But generally, yeah, it's not something. Actually, if it's in there, maybe there are people that have got a fear of dying. Actually, I didn't look at it from the other book because I only thought about it because it was written. I don't have a fear. In fact, I don't think I know anybody that has a fear of dying. Yeah.
My kids, when they were younger, and he talks about young people, and I know both my kids went through a phase when they were like 5 or 6 years old that they would cry because they were scared of dying because, you know, someone might have died and they didn't understand it. So I think, you know, sometimes young kids might have the fear for a while because of lack of understanding. And, you know, it's like it's not going to happen for a long time. And, you know, that's all you can do. It's, you know, I'm not going to say, well, everyone's going to die someday. A 5 or 6 year old.
It's not comforting, is it? But you know what? Yeah, like what you just said there too, that fear lots of times is because of ignorance, lack of knowledge, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So I know where I'm going is a better place. It's just how I get there that worries me a little bit at times, but it's like, you know what? I'm focusing on my health. I'm focusing on what I do want. And I want to be, you know, healthy and walking and hiking and taking trips and seeing the world and enjoying life.
Brilliant.
Yeah, because, you know, you can have all the money in the world, but if you don't have your health, like my mom's in a wheelchair. She had an aortic aneurysm rupture like 14 years ago and lost blood to her spinal cord for too long. So since then, she's been in a wheelchair. And, she still gets around and she's sharp and all this stuff. I mean, she just bought a house 5 hours away. So, you know, I mean, she just moved out of her, you know, home she was in for 47 years. So, I mean, I really admire her spunk. But, you know, she does say, you know what, take care of your health because she's in pain and what have you. And so, you know, she's not trying to put fear, but, you know, because up until that day, she was healthy. And my father, other than losing his mind, healthy as a horse. I mean, you know, it was sad to see his mind go. So, yeah, I just don't, I don't want to be one of these old people that are like crippled and, you know, and have another 20, 30 years. It's like, no, thanks.
Yeah. as you say that, because you said, you know, you could have all the money in the world, but if you don't have your health, and that made me think about my goals that I was writing out, and I mean, my visions, and I went in, you know, like the house and everything, and I forgot to write how healthy I am and how fit I am, so therefore to enjoy it. And it was about, I don't know, 2 months ago. I read it now, and you know, everything was perfect. And of course, in my mind, I had, you know, obviously I expect to be well enough to enjoy it, but I hadn't committed that to paper. I hadn't written down that I am, you know, healthy in mind and body and spirit. I hadn't written that down. I just took it for granted that obviously I'm going to have all this wealth, lovely house, and everything's going
Yeah.
to be amazing. This great job. But it didn't occur to me to write down, oh yeah, that I am going to be fit and healthy and well. So I had to go back and do that. You know, otherwise, you know, imagine I got it all and I manifested that, and like you said, I've got everything and I'm not well, or you know, I have an accident or something, or I can't walk or whatever. I mean, I know anything could happen, but it would be the fact that it didn't occur to me to write in there.
Yeah,
You know,
well, I do my affirmations, and I'm a trader, and so I have a goal that I want to be financially successful, and I have a financial goal, and all this. And one of the things that they said in the Bob Proctor is that, you know, you want to focus on your one big goal, and then the other things take care of themselves. But you know, my health, like as far as exercising and maybe eating right, you know, isn't like a strength for me. So I've incorporated that in my daily affirmations about me being healthy, and how exercise, both cardiovascular and strength training, you know, how they're helping my body, which is helping my mind, so I can be sharp and trade with clarity and have a good night's sleep. So I'm incorporating the affirmations for my health, and how they're going to help me with my trading. Because they say, you know, focus on your big goal. And it's like, but I want to also focus on my health. So I'm doing that. And this week, like Tuesday, I woke up and I thought, that's it. No more cream and sugar in my coffee. I went black. And can't say I'm loving it, but I thought I just don't want to start my day with drinking a lot of sugar and cream. I figured that's just not good for my brain. And you know, and I also, today was my first day I just went to just decaf coffee, and I'll do that for a couple of days, and then I'll just get off the coffee and just drink warm water or some tea. Because it's like, you know, because I'm writing about, I want to be healthy and what my goals are and how I choose to eat healthy foods, you know, and keep my blood sugar levels. Because, you know, they say Alzheimer's, they say, like, they also say people with diabetes have a higher propensity to get Alzheimer's, and I don't have it, but my dad was pre-diabetic, his two brothers were diabetic, and my grandmother was diabetic. I have blood sugar issues, so that's where it's like, you know what? I want to control my sugar levels. You know, I want that healthy brain, that beautiful, mushy brain, well hydrated, to help me with my trading. You know, and all the money that's going to come our way. So, yeah, include it in your affirmations.
That is what I started to do. And and it does make a difference. It will make a difference for you too, as you keep focusing, because you know, at the beginning of the year, I just started going to the gym, where I started doing yoga, and I wasn't trying. I just wanted to. And I guess that's because where my area of focus was, or my area of focus changed to, I want to be fit, I want to be healthy, and I will be. And repeatedly doing it meant that I just found circumstances came that there was an opportunity to join a gym really cheap, that the yoga classes and aerobics were at times that I could make it. It was insane, but it was good. I just, you know, obviously attracted these opportunities, but yeah, it was my focus. And suddenly, like, there I am, I'm doing it. I am, you know, I used to be quite lazy. And actually, I'm not going to lie. I can't stand going yoga, and I can't stand going to aerobics until I get there. When I get there, I love it. But the thought of going is like, it's like, oh, I can't be bothered. And I just know. And I absolutely, it's funny. It's just, that must be just an old way of thinking. The second I'm in the room, and I'm in the pool, I absolutely love it. Have a great time each time. But then it's like sometimes I just go. I just ignore that thought in my head and I just go. Because I know I'm gonna have a great time. But yeah, sometimes I'm like, oh, I want to do this, and that makes me smile. That I would think that thought. Still trying to it's old conditionings, isn't it? Still trying to get myself to be, lazy, I suppose. But yeah, I love it. I love when I'm there in the actual class.
Well, and eventually you're going to have the neuroplasticity in your brain that is going to, develop the habit that it's going to override your old habit. My husband, because my husband for 8 years worked out with my son, like 4 to 6 days a week. It used to be 6 days, but now, it was 4. And it's just something that, because my husband's been doing it for so long, my son is very disciplined, and that's what got my husband going. Mm-hmm. He loves it, and he looks like, he drives almost 30 minutes to go to the gym because he loves that gym. And, he's listening to Bob Proctor or whatever on the way, so he's making use of his time. But it's, he's developed that habit and now my son moved to Daytona Beach, Florida. And, it's he still goes, but he's maybe not as disciplined as he was, but he's still he goes 3 times a week at least, and he loves it. And I'm going to maybe start going with him, if we can, sync the time we go. Because I know once I'm there, like you say, I enjoy it, but it's getting me there. It's like I'll come up with every excuse.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, I need to get going myself.
These excuses are actually real. I mean, they sound like excuses, but there are things that need to be done legitimately that we could use. But yeah, you have to ignore them. You have to ignore.
I have 2 cats, and this is the time of year that they're just shedding. And so it's like, okay, my furniture looks like it's got fur. So he went to the gym, and I spent an hour and a half vacuuming everything and all the furniture and just, brushing them. And so I looked at it as exercise.
That is exercise, yeah.
It was. I was sweating my butt off, but I got it done. So, but anyways, great call. I need to get going. So have a lovely Mother's Day if you're mothers.
Yes.
And we'll be on the call next week.
Okay. Have a great week, everyone.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.